Why is it amoral and hypocritical to invest in index funds? Today on the Wall Street Journal, we're talking about investing. So many of our listeners are probably familiar with investing or invest for their own sake, for their retirement. So in this episode, we're hoping to give some guidance for Catholic investing. Before we start, a little disclaimer that the Wall Street Journal is not meant to judge our past actions, but inspire our future ones. So this episode will do the same. So Brian, follow up to the first question. Should I even invest?
Yes, but you don't have to invest in stocks. But at the same time, you probably should consider investing in stocks if you plan on getting into or remaining in the middle class. Because remember, the major opponent of somebody in the middle class is inflation. And investing in stocks helps you beat or at least keep up with inflation. And you shouldn't be scrupulous about investing in stocks because we could look to the church as an example. The Vatican invests in stocks. The USCCB invests in stocks, and so do most dioceses. So if we care at all about what the church thinks and how it acts, we can model that and feel pretty comfortable about ourselves.
So if the answer is yes, what's wrong with index funds? What's the problem? Why are they immoral and hypocritical?
Well, for a couple of reasons. So one is that they lack discernment. So an index fund is when you just invest in, let's say, the top 500 companies in the New York Stock Exchange or in the top 2,000, like the Russell 2000. You're just investing in all of the companies. Some of those companies are morally good. Some are morally bad. Others are rather neutral. So when you're investing and you're not thinking about Catholic social teaching principles in your decision making, you're basically making decisions without discernment.
And we talked about in season 1, when we talked about Old Testament principles, that discernment and responsibility to discern was a principle of the Bible that carries on to today.
Mm-hmm. This is the opposite of what Adam Smith would say. Adam Smith would say in The Wealth of Nations, just seek your own good and that will help society. If everybody's just seeking their own good, that's what's best for society. The invisible hand, right? Mm-hmm. That is not a Catholic way of thinking. So when we invest, we need to think about which investments we're making and who it is that we're pumping cash into, which companies we're pumping cash into. Mm. Yeah.
So I get why they are amoral, but what makes them hypocritical?
Well, investing in an index fund could be hypocritical if you're purposefully avoiding purchasing products from certain companies that you disagree with morally. Mm. So let's say there's a pharmaceutical company that is creating a product that you're against and you refuse that product or even that whole company in the marketplace. But when it comes time to invest in your 401k for your retirement, you have this giant index fund and you're investing in them, which is even more beneficial for the company than buying their product.
So if index funds aren't the best option or a good option for Catholics, what should we invest in?
Well, I have some general advice and then some rather specific advice. So generally, you should be seeking 3 things. Number 1, seek good returns, because remember, the primary goal is to beat inflation. Number 2 is invest in companies that fit your well-developed conscience. So you need to have a well-developed conscience. You could listen to the Wall Street Journal or read all of these encyclicals if you prefer that. So your conscience, you're thinking about subsidiarity, solidarity, other Catholic social principles. Are these companies fulfilling these principles or not? If they're not, the next thing to do is divest in those companies. And if you have voting rights within a company, let's say you are a wealthy person, you own a lot of shares of a certain company, you could actually use that ownership power to influence the company. Most individual stock investors don't have that kind of power, though.
So it would probably be difficult for an individual to pick and choose which companies they would invest in and have it be productive. So what are ways to do this?
Yeah, if you're not in the business and if you're not able to maintain an awareness of what every company in your portfolio is doing, it's probably best to just get into a Catholic mutual fund. These types of funds invest in things that you hope are in line with Catholic social teaching.
Is there anything else?
Well, if you have a ton of money, you can do a separately managed account,
Okay.
which is when you work with an advisor to build your own portfolio, custom portfolio. But usually you need to have a very large minimum to invest to get into an account like that.
Okay. So Catholic mutual funds, they are, at least try to be, a discerning fund. They try to screen the company so that they're not immoral. They're actually using the principles, the Catholic social principles, to decide who to invest in and who to divest in.
There are several Catholic mutual funds out there, and it's worth shopping around and seeing who fits your needs the best.
So aside from investing in funds, are there any other kinds of investments that you think are worth it and morally good for a Catholic to use?
I really like the idea of putting a high percentage of your investment for retirement in real estate. So this is something that is kind of off the radar for a lot of people, but it diversifies your portfolio for retirement outside of stocks and bonds and so forth. And real estate is real. So you're eliminating major currency risks, which some people may have some major currency risks.
So specifically for people that perhaps have a 401k with their employer, which is presumably investing in an index fund, what would that person do? That individual who has it provided for them by their employer and looks toward their employer and doesn't have a Catholic fund available.
Yeah, you definitely want to get the employer match, right? So if your employer, secular or religious, if your employer does not have a Catholic mutual fund option, you have a number of paths to take. So number one is you could ask your HR manager for a Catholic option. And it's even better if you get a group of your coworkers to ask HR. They're going to be more likely to want to cater to that need. Remember, the whole purpose of a 401k of health insurance is employee retention. They want to make you happy in your job. A second opportunity is a self-directive option. So most 401k plans will allow you to invest in mutual funds in your 401k that are not listed as the options. You just have to contact HR and they will get you access to the fund that you are looking for. So if you have like Schwab or Fidelity, they have these capabilities already. Finally, this is the least ideal, but it is an option if the first two aren't options, and that's called an in-service withdrawal. So you can take 10% of your 401k balance and tax-free shift it into a Catholic mutual fund that you believe in and care about. So it's not 100% perfect, but it is something. And over the course of several years, 10% will be significant.
And just to highlight, so a lot of these recommendations are for, let's say, doing it through your employer to get something like an employer match. But an individual who looks to open an account on their own can also find a mutual fund, a Catholic mutual fund, and open an account.
You can start from scratch today.
So that pretty much does it for our episode on Catholic investing principles. We started the episode by asking why index funds were amoral and hypocritical, and I think we gave some pretty good answers. A great option on the flip side is Catholic mutual funds because they're discerning. They follow the Catholic principles that we've been following in the Paul Street Journal. And there's also options. So that does it for our episode of the Paul Street Journal. See you next time.